Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the Mokono Man at YouTube with another model tutorial. Today we'll be demonstrating how to use and reviewing Mr. Dissolved Putty. It's a very useful tool if you do have a range and spectrums of putty. This one is just a bit thicker than primer and still in a liquid state. If you've done your sanding and a bit of priming and you've got any damage left over, this just sort of gets all into the right nook and crannies, hardens and sands back quite nicely, so no aggressive sandpaper is required. Can be applied with a Q-tip or brush. I have attempted to airbrush this to no avail. It just becomes so thin it doesn't really build up at all. And being Mr. Hobby, it applied to resin as nicely as it does styrene. The product needs to be stirred before use every time. I find putting a very large ball bearing does the trick perfectly. Over time it will separate and a lot of the microfilling or putty components will sit on the bottom and the top will just be a very lightly mixed slurry, virtually absolutely useless. So give it a really good shake or stir. I find shaking to be far more superior. Also, this is lacquer based. It is going to shrink a bit, so you generally want to build up. And when it starts to dry out and shrink a bit and you want to get it a bit more thin, more or less just add more lacquer thinner. It's a very, very nice consistency, more of a milk off-white colour, so it does stand out on white surfaces. Now we can see here that there's these little weird pock marks or pit holes or whatnot from two areas that were damaged, primed, sanded and still not quite right. So you can see just with a Q-tip, build it on nice and thick. It goes on a bit like a liquid. You want to hold it up the direction that you're applied the liquid in to allow it to firm up. It does take a while and it's very, very slow drying. Generally it's hard to the touch in a couple of hours. I would allow to give it more so 24 hours to fully chemical harden and be ready to sand. Another approach is lightly applying layers, allowing it to harden and applying more layers. So generally with the shrinkage, a thicker load and starting with about 240-300 grit sandpaper and working your way up will remove the fault and be ready for priming. You can see it's a very smooth consistency and it just applied absolutely beautifully and smoothly. Very slow drying, so it's not going to get tacky or funny, which is more so than an advantage if you're not so impatient. Now after a day drying, it leaves a very, very smooth surface if you do not interrupt the skinning or drying process, and it does feel almost velvety or soft, but quite hard, almost akin to the elasticity of green stuff. With wet and dry sandpaper, it is not too hard that it can't be sanded, sort of like super glue or a harder material. And I find starting as per my sanding video with around 1 to 200 grit just to scruff her up a bit, and then you work your way down to the other grits, about 240, 4 to 500 and then 2000. And once you don't have to sand it back to its raw plastic or colour. Once it starts feeling smooth to the touch, you can start going from the harder sandpapers to something that's more akin to polishing, 1000 grit, 2000 grit. Once completely done, we're going to chuck a bit of primer on it and look for faults and see if it was a one coverall. We've got some Tamiya primer. And yeah, that's not too bad. There's 1 or 2 pit marks left, but that's because I think I didn't cover it properly. But yeah, too easy. I'm absolutely over the moon and very happy with how this putty has come out. Now, generally the process is you apply a more thicker putty, sand it back, any pit holes, you apply this putty and then sand it back with less harsh grit sandpaper. I did apply it a bit thick and used 120 with the tiny and last remaining pit holes and whatnot, only because I'm polishing the bits to do a very, very fine paint job. If there's a matte paint job, these would be good enough to just pass immediately. Apply a thinner coat and start around the 300 grit and work my way back. Absolutely highly recommend it. It worked really good as a second part to just doing finer work. I'm working on a scratch built component and just applying that and sanding back. There was just so little faults, it wasn't funny. So scratch building and modifying, fantastic, and doing very, very high gloss finishes or achieving that perfect smooth finish. This putty is not too bad at all. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, until next time, stay tuned for further content. Check out Facebook for work in progresses, where my videos get posted, and all the usual housekeeping. Catch you guys later, and thank you very much for watching.